All right, hi. I I'm gonna go ahead and start the session. I think we're still waiting for a couple of people, but we have such a tight schedule that I want to go ahead and start this session. This workshop is on children's literature, and we've invited Jessie TakenAlive Rencountre to be our speaker today. I want to go ahead and read Jessie's bio for those of you who aren't familiar with her work. Jessie TakenAlive Rencountre is a Hunkpapa Lakota from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and now makes her home in Rapid City, South Dakota. She's a 2017 Great Plains Emerging Tribal Writers Award winner for her children's book, Peta Shows Me See the Light. She works as an elementary school counselor for the Rapid City School District. Her passion is to help students remember their importance in life, as well as how to utilize their unique talents and passions to create better communities for themselves and future generations to come. She is also a Lakota jingle dress dancer and loves to educate others about Lakota culture using storytelling as well as song and dance. And Peta Shows Me See the Light is one of my favorite children's books. I first learned about this book when I was teaching at South Dakota State University, and I was administering the Emerging Tribal Writers Award. And that's actually the first time that I read, Peta Shows Me See the Light, and I thought it was such a great book. And we ended up giving Jessie the award because it was such a great book. So I'm really glad that she could be here with us today. Since it's such a small group, I want us to go ahead and go around and introduce ourselves. And then I'll turn it over to Jessie for her presentation, just so that she can get to know us. Teresa, do you want to start with you? I know that you're newer to the group.
I'm Petu Washtemi Takiapi. Thanks for letting me come in as a guest to your group. I really appreciate it. I'm from Pajutazizi, from the Upper Sioux community here in Minnesota, Sisituan, Wahpetuan, Dakota. Let's see, both Sarah and Diane have invited me. I guess that's why I am joining this time. I wanted to other years and wasn't able to make it. And I've published a children's book, Grasshopper Girl. The publisher is Black Bears and Blueberries Publishing. And working on we have another book that is coming out, and it's busy with this morning. We're doing pictures and it's getting ready to get sent to a typesetter. So I'm really excited about that. But thank you for this wonderful opportunity to join you guys. And I've enjoyed listening to our guest and look forward to hearing more. And I just also want to thank you for the bag of all the wonderful reading. I'm looking forward to that. Inamaya.
Thank you, Teresa. Nick Estes, do you want to introduce yourself and then pass it along to somebody else?
Sure. My name is Nick Estes. I have been a book writer since 2000, or for the last 8 years. I'm enrolled at Lower Brule Sioux Tribe, and yep, I'm currently living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'll just pass it on to who else do we got here? Sorry, I can't see my. Oh, I'll pass it on to Vange.
Vange, you might want to check your mic, because if you're talking, we can't hear you. You might have to unmute it.
All right, sorry. Sorry, what was I supposed to say?
Oh, just introductions, Vange, just so that Jessie can get to know
Just
her.
making sure. I am Vange, 13, going into 8th grade, from Sisseton. I go to TC and stuff, and never attended one of these before, but it's pretty cool. And yeah.
I'm just saying you need to make a series.
Gabrielle, can you introduce yourself?
Gabrielle Tadeusz-Ganska. I'm from the community of and I've been a longtime member of Oak Lake Writers. And I've worked on children's books when I was teaching, and I want to get back to writing again. Vidamia.
Thanks, Gabrielle. And Nick Livermont?
All right. Hi, I've written the outlines for a couple of book series, mostly like activity books. So yeah, I'd be happy to learn more on how I could move forward with those.
Thanks. And then Tashi, do you want to introduce yourself? And then we'll turn it over to Jessie.
Yeah, I'm Tashi Barando, and I'm the director of Oak Lake, and that's who I am. Thank you, Jessie.
Sounds good. Thank you all for your introductions. It's nice to meet you. And it's awesome to have a variety of writers, from accomplished writers already in the children's book genre to young people already. So it's really awesome. Sarah, I have one quick question before you head out here. We go from 3:30 to 4:30, correct? So 1 hour?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not going over or under. So, okay. So I want to, I know Sarah already introduced me and such, and I want to just add on a little bit about how I got into writing for children. You know, I work as a elementary school counselor and a half for the past 14 years, and being able to work with children over the number of years has really opened my eyes into the need of having children's books, especially for Indigenous children, but for all children, you know, and as a school counselor, I was always looking for certain types of books that would be helpful in certain areas when I was working with these children individually or in small groups. And I would look throughout my own personal library in my office, as well as looking online. And I kept thinking, gosh, this would be awesome if there was a book for this. But there was never a book for that. And then I also, in addition to that too, growing up with my late mother being one of the best storytellers ever, and always being intrigued by her stories. A lot of these stories were just made up. Some of these were passed down from our own Lakota people throughout the generations. And her being one of the best storytellers ever it always amazed me. And so as a school counselor, when I would go into my classrooms to do my presentations, I kind of stumbled upon actually the idea of, instead of just doing a lesson that was already put into a curriculum guide by like our National School Counseling Association, I would use storytelling, whether it was with just Native American children at the Native schools that I worked at, or if it was multiple cultures in the classroom. One thing I always found out is that storytelling was always a huge success for me, no matter if it was fifth graders or if it was the little 5-year-olds in kindergarten who had attention spans that were very short. In even the little kids that just had a really difficult time sitting and concentrating, storytelling would always grasp their attention. And I took that and I used that to my advantage to help instill some of these values. For example, if we were talking about honesty in one of the grades and such, I would either find a story or I'd make up a story on my own, usually the latter, and then share that story with the kids. And we'd go through and we talk about some of the questions or examples that they have and get them excited about being truthful people. So storytelling has always been a huge part of my career. And it wasn't until 2017 when I finally realized, like, okay, I'm actually going to publish some of these books. So I do have a short presentation for you guys that maybe we can pull up here. And I emailed it over. Let's see. Thank you. And it's just really short. I've used this before with other presentations and kind of the history behind it. And I think being Indigenous, all of us have already known this, but maybe it's just a good reminder to us as well too. So we can start with the first slide, which is called Native Perspectives in Children's Literature. And like I said, storytelling has always been, yep, we can go to that one, the first one, as a means of education. And so, you know, no matter which tribe we come from, storytelling has always been a huge part of our culture. And this is how our children learned the different values and such that were we're able to mold them into the respectful people, young adults, when they were grown, and to being able to have a great society. These stories that were used were always passed down for generations, or some of these stories might have come to them in a dream, the elders, parents and such, or sometimes they made them up, just to be able to help share. A lot of them almost always had lessons incorporated with them that help mold, like lessons about respect, lessons about honesty, lessons about generosity. And there was always a purpose to it. And I think storytelling is kind of like an art, honestly. We have amazing storytellers in our cultures as Indigenous people. And I think that these storytellers are actually the ones that are the amazing authors. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And then we all know this as well too, maybe not so much our younger guests on here too, but when change happened, a lot of our traditions were taken from us as well, and instead of sitting in a teepee, or whatever tribe we came from, instead of sitting in that circle and learning from the stories, our relatives who went to these boarding schools were sat in desks, and a lot of the storytelling were basically eliminated. A lot of these stories that were passed down for generations they were lost, or they were not allowed to share them anymore, because our children were put in these boarding schools and taught and made to learn about math, made to learn about whatever it was that they were learning in these boarding schools. And storytelling was not one of them that was put in that educational change. So we can go to the next slide. So a lot of our current day educators right now, especially on our reservations and stuff, a lot of our educators are utilizing our old ways to teach again to our young people. And a lot of them, will sit in these circles like this because, that's historically and traditionally how our children learn, was in circles. When we're in that circle, we are able to feel like we are part of something bigger. We don't feel like the teacher is the main teacher, because everyone in that circle has something to bring. Everyone has something to offer, and we're all equally important. And so getting back to this, is important. And a lot of educators, I think, are realizing that storytelling and sharing in our traditional way like this is what helps connect our children, helps connect our students and make them interested. I think we've all experienced this in life before, sitting in a classroom, if we were in a desk, sitting in those straight rows and stuff, that it doesn't make you feel like you're actually part of something, that you're just there to memorize something, to turn around and spit it back out on a paper. But as a teacher, as an educator, I was in a classroom for 4 years with high school students as well too. And I always made sure that my classroom was set up in a way where we were in a circle, whether it was our tables in a circle or we put our chairs in a circle. It was always an opportunity for us to share that way. So we can go to the next one. Influencers today. We all know this awesome, amazing author right there in the middle by Mr. Joseph Marshall. Joseph Marshall is one of my role models. And when I was teaching at the high school level, I utilized his Lakota Way book in my classroom lessons because of how amazing it is. And each chapter, my students, even non-Indigenous students that took my class, would focus on one of these values, because it's not just a Lakota value, it's a value that all of us as society can utilize. And so when we utilize this and stuff, we always did project-based learning out of this. Also, We Are Water Protectors by Carol Lidstrom. Awesome, amazing book. So proud of her as well too for making it on the map as an Indigenous children's author, and especially with a topic that's so important right now for our whole world to know. So she is a huge influence for me as well too. Both of them, I think, for a lot of us. So you can turn to the next page. I just put some pictures of my current books up that I have out. I have some books on the way right now. My first one, like Sarah was talking about, is called Peta Shows Me Through the Light. This one it's been published and it came out in spring of 2018, but it's just now kind of finally making momentum. And I don't have an agent, and I use a hybrid publisher for this particular book. And so it's finally gaining some momentum regionally. And I'm pretty excited because it's being utilized in a lot of school districts, not just Native American or Indigenous school districts, but also our non-Indigenous school districts as well too. So I'm really excited about that. Thunder's Hair came as a result of me as a school counselor listening to a lot of our Indigenous boys who shared with me through tears and such about their frustrations, their struggle with having long hair in a public school system where they would get teased and bullied and such. We are all related. That came as a kind of as a request for a book that is meant for like preschool age and such. You know, a lot of parents, grandparents were requesting books that they could read to their little kids. That third book, We Are All Related, is more of a picture book with just big words. It's very simple, and it just talks about how we're related to everything. It's just an old Lakota saying that we've had and belief that we're related to everything. So not only are these books tied to our Native communities and address things that help empower our own Indigenous children, but they're books that hopefully will help educate our non-Indigenous relatives as well too, into our own culture to help them have better understanding about our children and such. So that's all I have about there. So we can turn that off. But I wanted to get into a little bit about books, and it kind of sounds like we have a really good array of experience in here, from very beginners to authors that have already published their children's books or wanting to get back into them, which is really exciting because I always feel like we can never have enough Indigenous authors. There's always going to be a need for more and more Indigenous authors. And so I really hope that we continue to gain that momentum as an Indigenous community for writing children's books and showing our children that they too can be authors as well too. So, you know, we're going to start off with maybe some, and you will have some time for some questions at the end as well too. And so I want to kind of start off with kind of addressing, like, how do we even come up with the idea? And from that short slideshow that I showed you guys, my ideas came from either the need for or requested need for children's books, and also a lot of these children's books that I've written, they are needed in classrooms and school counseling offices and homes and such, but also a lot of the books that I wrote are based off experience. As a mother, as a daughter, as a Indigenous person, as a school counselor. And a lot of the values that are put in here are values that have been passed down to us through multiple generations as Indigenous peoples. And so when I think back of what I want children to learn, I utilize my own experiences as well as the need. And so one question that we can always ask ourselves if we are wanting to write a children's book is, if I was a child again, what type of book did I want to see back then when I was a child, or what would I have want to see right now as a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a big sister, big brother, and want to read to that child in my family. And so those are two big questions that can help guide us when we're thinking of ideas to write our next children's book, because there's always that need. And so those are big. And so I kind of just want to have you take a moment here. And I think hopefully everybody has like a writing utensil or like some scratch paper. I know everybody got those books, or maybe you already have just that little scratch paper in front of you. But I want you to answer those two questions. And then we'll go around and share, okay? So the first question is what book would you have loved to see as a child? And I think when we're little like that, whether you went to a school on a reservation or a public education school, our public school where most of your classmates were non-native, like, you know, I experienced as well for a while. What kind of book would you have hoped to see? Okay, so that's your first question. So I'm going to give you like a minute or two to write your answer to that. Okay. Even if you're not finished, even if you have like some keywords there that will help you kind of jar your memory when you look back at your notes, because these are mainly kind of for you. And then the second one right now, where you are in life, no matter if you're a middle school student or you're a mother or grandmother, uncle, dad, whatever, wherever stage you are right now in life, what book would you love to see as a parent, a big sister, a cousin, an uncle, a father, an aunt, whatever you may be right now, whatever role you're playing, to a younger child? What book would you like to see now that's not written? You know, some of these are, you know, and this answer might be different from your first one because of, you know, things change over the years. Your first answer is you as a child. Now your second answer about what book you want to see now and where you're at in this stage in life right now is things have changed over that time. Our society is different and you might see things differently as well too. So I want you to write that second one down of like, what book would you like to see for your child now? Your sister, your little brother, your son, daughter, your niece, nephew, your grandchild. All right, so hopefully everybody has something written down. I'm gonna kind of go from what I see on my screen. I'm gonna start, and if that's okay, if you can share. Vanj, if you would like to share your answer about, let's start with that first answer first of like, what book is that you as a child would have loved to be read to as a little girl, being really young and such? What type of book would you have loved to see but didn't see?
Probably my answer was something like as a child I was read like native stories, you know, my mom always told me stories and stuff, but like more of that, probably like a book like with all of them, and then also more about like history of Native people and everything, you know, just like growing up with that. I did kind of, but I would have liked to learn more about that.
Great. Okay. So like the history of our people and such, right?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think that's important because, you know, you're right. As children, as Indigenous people, even now, like we don't really know that history until we get a little bit older, or unless we are, we're blessed enough to have someone in our family kind of share with us the truths. And sometimes a lot of us, we don't get taught that because our adults are kind of scared to share the dark truth of our history as Indigenous peoples. And so they kind of save that until we get older. But I think if we're able to know about that as children, it kind of spares us the shock when we get older into like middle school and high school. So that's a good point to share. Thanks, Benj, for sharing. I'll come back to you in a little bit for your second answer, okay? We'll go over to Gabrielle.
Am I unmuted?
Yep, you're unmuted now.
Okay. Well, I grew up with, I'm an older person. I'm an elder, so I grew up with grandparents and great grandparents that were storytellers and told, the creation narratives and family stories and family history. So I had a different perspective about storytelling because I had access to those narratives. I knew that there was something profoundly missing in the formal education system, whether you went to a boarding school, day school, or parochial school or public school. There still wasn't the literature from, the Oceti shot going. And it wasn't until I went to the Institute of Art in Santa Fe that I finally got access to written literature. So my background is a little bit different. And so I am aware that there's missing literature, both for children and adults.
Mhm. So as a little girl, when you would be in that formal educational setting, were you hoping that other classmates of yours and such were able to have access to some of those stories that you were shared with from your relatives?
I mean, I knew that that was missing, and I knew that that's what they wanted too. But I also was well aware of, the times when I was growing up, there was a lot of oppression, and you didn't dare say anything. Because like my first experience, I wrote an essay saying Columbus didn't discover it in America, and I got in trouble for that. So I knew there was still oppression in the formal education systems of America.
Yes.
And I knew it was wrong, but I also, there's fear, do I dare speak up? I'm just a kid.
Right. So if that wasn't like a fear, or if that oppression wasn't there, invisibly felt and seen and such when you were a kid, if you could have changed something like that, what would you have physically be there as far as books? In the classroom?
Probably Charles Eastman's books, because they were out of print by that time, but we had them in our homes and I read them. I read Wigwam Evenings, and we had his unpublished work too. The one that he did on the Indian Bible that never got published. So I knew, and I was aware that there was something really wrong with the education system.
Mm-hmm. So just in general, more content that kind of shared us as our, pop-up came on my screen.
It should just have been literature that Dakota people's literature was the equal of anybody in society.
Right, for sure. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think that's a big reason why I think a lot of us have that interest, is because I think we all share that passion of wanting to have our Indigenous children have access to literature that is from our perspective by Indigenous authors. As a young girl too, growing up on a reservation, but on a public or in a public school system where not even half of our children and our classmates in my class were Native, we never had access to literature for Native
Jessie,
students.
we lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. Oh, sorry. We have a big thunderstorm here and we just had a close lightning. I don't know if you saw that lightning in the back.
It might be something like that, because it even said your internet was having a moment of.
Yeah. It shook my whole house just now, so sorry about that. I was just saying, I think that's something that we all share as a whole group in here, all of us that are on here, is that we want that need to have our Indigenous children have access to Native literature, because there's not enough of it. It's out there, but it's not enough. It's not representative where it should be, right? And so I think we all share that passion. So thank you for sharing, Gabrielle. We're gonna go over to Nick Al.
All right. Okay, so to answer those two questions, the book that I would have liked as a kid, I really got into writing these books after reading Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. And she talks about how we as educators or parents or, anybody we're competing with video games and all sorts of, really addictive media. And so how do we compete with that? And so that's what I set out to do with these books, was to make something that was hopefully as engaging and, kind of fantastic, like a video game. So that's what inspired me as far as that goes. And then as far as like, as a parent or an uncle, what I would like to see in a children's book, tried to bake in all those things as far as traditional values, stewardship, sustainability, community relations, or conflict mitigation, or how to navigate disagreement, and then emotional intelligence. So yeah, all of that is what led me to write the books that I wrote. So
Awesome. Those are all well-needed subjects that we need with the books for children. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay. You already went into my second question, or you already answered that second question. So thanks for doing that ahead of time. So, all right, we're going to go over to Teresa.
I really appreciate this question. So I went to my little girl self and I thought about how I felt really kind of ostracized as a brown chubby girl in school, and didn't have a lot of people that looked like me and could relate to. So, and I didn't like reading either. So that would kind of be another thing. But yeah, so I think like having a book that would show, like normalized differences in people, I think would be really good. So I really appreciate the question, and curious about where that could go. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I kind of feel this, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I felt like I didn't really, everything that I read as a little girl, that I didn't really connect with. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older when I started reading Water Lily, gosh, I didn't think of the name, Water Lily, when I was like, oh my gosh, this is written by a Native American woman. And I could not put the book down. And before that, I was not really a reader. And so, kind of going back to the experience of knowing that, first of all, it was an Indigenous author. And second of all, it was something that interested me, that I could relate with. That kind of, based off that reality or that experience for me, kind of helped kind of push me too, and realize that, okay, I have stories to share as well too. And I want children who may have felt like me in the past to be able to relate to books and kind of get them in the state of being excited to read, because we have to read anyway when we're in that educational setting. Why not have it be a book that they're going to be excited to read, and as well as be by an author that they can relate to. So thank you for sharing, Teresa. I'm going to go over to Nick. My screen kind of changed here. I think Nick Estes.
Yep. I guess for me as a kid, the books that I really liked were like Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree and The Lorax. But later on, when I reread those authors, both Dr. Seuss and Shel Silverstein, I found a lot of problematic things in there. So I really appreciated the Water Protector book that came out. And I think that like more contemporary literature about like, our relationship to the natural world as young people and what it means. I think especially coming from like Lakota values is really important. So I guess my book has already been written in some senses.
Awesome. That's exciting. And I think me as well too, when I seen that book come out, even Joseph Marshall's book and even Water Lily and stuff, being a young girl back then reading that, I was really excited, and it kind of sparked something in me reading Water Lily. And then to come across Joseph Marshall's book, you know, as an adult, and then also just recently seeing We Are Water Protectors, it was like, oh my gosh, things are happening now, and it's just the beginning, and there's still a lot of work for a lot of authors to do yet, as Indigenous authors, to get that content out there. But you know, it's exciting because it's starting now, and the momentum is going to pick up here. So the reason why I asked this question is because it's always a good place to start. If you're kind of searching for your inspiration for your children's book, is going back to that question, or those two questions of what is something that I would have loved to read as a child that wasn't written. And the second one is, as right now where I'm at in my life, what children's book would I love to see for my child, grandchild, niece, or nephew. And so when we think of it from that perspective, it kind of helps us realize, oh, okay, that's a good starting point. Well, I wish this book was written. And that's kind of the inspiration behind Thunder's Hair as well too, is that, you know, there was no, that I came across, I didn't know of any books that talked about how we can overcome bullying as Indigenous children, and even adults, about our long hair and what's the purpose of our hair. A lot of little kids ask that, even though they're taught it, but being able to read it in a book, that our hair has power, it carries our spirit, it's part of us, and it's special. And then how to overcome bullying, tying those two things together, you know, that's something as a school counselor. I don't have any sons myself, but I do have nephews, and I'm friends with women who only have boys with long hair, and hearing their stories as well too. I really had wished that there was a book that was written about that, you know, hearing the stories about these little boys crying or being bullied, being made fun of, their hair being cut, pulled and such. And so I was like, you know, there needs to be a book for this. And so that's kind of how that inspiration came about. When we're writing these books, now that you kind of have an idea of something that was an idea that you are wanting to write, you know, if this has sparked an idea, and I know that Teresa, you know, you brought up something about where, I'm going to use your example. You talked about how you want to have a book out there that normalizes differences, even from an Indigenous perspective. That's a well-needed book that needs to be written, and I think there can be multiple books that can be written on that topic right there. So once you have your topic, you want to go back to what is it that you want that reader to learn. And that kind of helps guide your writing as well too. So an example, I'm going back to my book, Thunder's Hair, of what did I want my reader to learn? I wanted, and I'm envisioning when I was writing, you know, these things down, what I wanted the reader to learn, I was envisioning these little boys who shared their stories with me, whether they were students or nephews or children of friends and such, who would share their stories, who would cry, and I could feel their anger, and I can feel their sadness and their frustration. And I was like, okay, well, I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel that it's normal and it's okay to have long hair. Not just normal and okay, but I want them to feel proud of them having their hair. So that's something I wanted to make sure I included in that book that reader was going to walk away with. Another thing that I wanted to include in there that my reader was going to learn was, I know that sometimes children will take books to school and have their teacher read it. And a lot of the times our educators don't know, you know, a lot of our educators don't know the purpose of our hair as Indigenous people. And so I wanted to use it as a tool to educate the teachers as well as the classmates, because you know, the classmates don't have any idea of why we as Indigenous people grow our hair long. Sometimes even our own Indigenous children don't know that as well, because, you know, in some of the families that has been lost. But so I wanted to have that as an outcome for some of my readers, is that it was going to be used as an educational tool to help them understand why some of our Indigenous young boys and men and stuff wear their hair long. So those were two big outcomes. The third outcome I wanted in that book was how do we address bullying, right? Do we stay silent? How can we address our feelings with this? And how do we handle this in a way where it's not gonna get us in trouble, or how can we make this stop? And so utilizing my own tools as an elementary school counselor with conflict resolution and such, and how to handle bullying, I was able to incorporate that into that story. So those three big outcomes I put into my story, those were my three goals. Along with that, I utilized some of the values that were taught to me through my parents and grandparents, as well as some of their values that we have as Indigenous people about courage, about being a warrior, you know, and I utilize that in that book of Thunder's Hair to empower. Not only did I incorporate past images of our past warriors, but I wanted to incorporate something modern as well too. And in that book, there's a picture of this little boy imagining his uncle who has long braids and he has a suit jacket on and he's a lawyer, because that's what we see. And I want them to be able to not only envision something from the past, but be able to envision something here in the future. So I didn't want it to be something that was just in the past. I wanted it to be something here in our modern contemporary world as well too. So knowing what type of outcomes I wanted my reader to experience, that helped me write my book as well too. So when you're writing your children's book, if you can write down some of those three things, what do I want, or a few things, they don't have to be three things, but I think they can be more than three things, but what do I want my reader to get out of this? And this is where you write down those goals. And then when you have them all down, you're able to incorporate those into your story. And I think everyone in here, because we're in here, we have that talent, we have that gift to be able to create and write. It's kind of like baking a cake. That's kind of how I think of it, is you have your ingredients, you know how to do it, but these are the ingredients we want to make sure that we put in there. And sometimes our ingredients are different, right? Like my ingredients for this Thunder's Hair book was different from my ingredients for my We Are All Related book, or my Peta Shows Me Through the Light book. They use different ingredients, but the same type, if that makes sense. So we want to be able to make sure that we know that, okay? So that first question is, what would I want my inner child or my old child or contemporary child to read about, as well as what do I want my reader to get out of this? Those are really going to be two big key things that are going to help you guide your writing in this. The third thing that I want to talk about is like the values. A lot of us, when we're writing, we incorporate our own values into our writing. And then, you know, I think with every book that I've written, these 3 books and the ones that I'm currently writing, these are all values that I have lived with or have been taught from our culture. And so we always put a piece of us as writers and authors into our work. And I think people can feel that. So writing those down too, as one of your goals, what values do I want them to learn? And then when you're creating your characters, you know, your characters kind of take on those values as well too. I'll go back to that first book of Peta Shows Me Through the Light. That book is about an old man who comes to share a lesson with a little boy who's wondering why people do hurtful things. Well, in my book, I wanted my character, the old man who came, who's like the spirit guide, to be wise. And then I think of our Indigenous people, of what we've learned of our elders. You know, they're wise, they're compassionate, they're loving, they're patient and such. And so I utilize a lot of that into the building of these characters. And so when you're building your characters as well too, you think of what type of values do I want them to have, and is this going to match my overall goal of what my goal is to have my readers learn. Okay. So if we can write down, so you kind of have an idea right now, if you've written down that your answer to that first question about what type of book you would have loved to see or what is needed now for our children today. You have your idea, you have your base right there of what you want to write. Okay. And I want to go back to, I think it was Teresa. I'm sorry, Teresa, I'm just using you as an example about normalizing differences. If that is your basis right there of creating your children's book, then you're going to go into what are my goals as a author, what do I want my readers to learn? Okay, your goal is probably going to be, I want my reader to feel empowered to be who they are, no matter what their skin color is, their size is, their hair color, their hair length, how they dress, whatever, right? You want to make them feel empowered by that. The second thing then is that you're going to be thinking of some of the values that you have, that you are wanting to incorporate into the story. What kind of values are you going to teach these readers to have? And some values that might come to mind just off the top of my head with that idea and your base that you might have is to be able to think about, I want my reader to have courage if someone was to say something to them or make fun of them, and such. So those are kind of just an example of getting off the ground with your next idea and kind of brainstorming on what you would like your next children's book or your first children's book to be. I'm going to go around and leave it open for some questions. And this is not the only way to write. This is one process that works for me. There's other processes that work, but I'm just sharing what has been helpful to me with the 3 books that I have out now, and that I'm currently working on that right now as well too. So I want to leave it open for any questions on this process, any comments, or anything. So I'll go ahead and leave it open right now.
I have a question, Jessie. This is Teresa.
Yeah. Okay, Teresa.
And my apologies if I should know this already, but I'm anxious to get a hold of your other couple of books. But I'm wondering about how did you get those published? Because we heard from Joseph that really recommended an agent, and so I'm curious about that side of things for your books. You're on a roll, and so just curious about that.
Sure. I'm kind of learning and stumbling as I go along, because I don't have an agent, honestly, I'm kind of in the process of trying to decide if I want an agent right now, because there's some pros and cons to everything with how you publish and stuff. My first book that I first published with Peta Shows Me Through the Light, that was with the hybrid publisher, meaning that it's, kind of halfway self-publishing, halfway traditional publishing. With this hybrid publisher that I published with, this specific one, I still own all the rights to it, the copyrights to it. They do kind of the hard work of the editing, the sending off to the printer, putting it onto Amazon, Walmart.com, all that stuff that I don't know how to do. But the downfall to it is that when it goes off to print, when everything's done with the production and everything, before it prints, I have to put up the money to print ahead of time. The good thing with it though is they'll still sell it for me, and I get 85% of the royalties, and they get only 15. Another option with that too is instead of having the bulk of the books go to them in their warehouse, I just ship them here to my house, and then I go and I contact school districts, different organizations, and I sell them to them at a bulk price. So I make a little bit more money than 85%. I make the 100% profit off of that. It is a lot more work as far as contacting and stuff. So I'm doing my own agent job work, if that makes sense. So that's how that one worked. My fourth book that is currently in process right now is with that same publisher. Book number 2 and number 3 are actually self-published books. And I went that route because I wasn't, I guess I kind of wanted to experience what it was like. Oh, I'll tell you this, there's a lot of tears, a lot of frustration, almost giving up on the process of going through the self-learning, be self-taught and such, learning, watching YouTube tutorials for hours and trial and error and such, and finally getting it to the point where it was accepted enough for the software that I was uploading it to be accepted. The downfall with that is it's, you know, I self-publish on Amazon, and the only place you can buy it is Amazon. So there's a downfall of that. But with that, I don't have to put up any money for printing costs. It's just a print. It's a print on demand, basically. If I do want to buy like 100 books ahead of time, I do have to print for that, and then get shipped to me. So there's pros and cons to each, and I kind of, I don't have to necessarily worry about putting up costs for people if they want to go online and buy it. So there's, personally, I'm kind of like in the hybrid route, and I haven't dabbed into yet going the route of traditional publishing. So I have sent in my books, those 3 books, to a traditional publisher at one time, and they weren't accepted for a project, and so, which is fine, you know, in this industry, you kind of learn to not get your feelings hurt because it's just like, it's a no for now type of deal, or no, it's not for us type of deal. But I know that there's going to be readers that want it. So I know that it's somehow I just need to get the book done. So it's kind of basically personal preference. If you go the route of having an agent, they do get some of those royalties, as well as they help you find a traditional publisher, just like Joseph. And I had this conversation with Joseph a couple years ago, and he kind of shared with me a little bit on that process. He says your agent is going to be able to help you find a traditional publisher. The bad thing with that is they will own all the rights to it. And so you basically don't have a say so on when it's being printed, when it's stopped being printing. And most of the royalties go to that traditional publisher. So, but the good thing with that is, with a traditional publisher, you also have an opportunity to get your book into many different vendors that you normally would not have it in. Like for me, my books, if you were to go to a vendor, a Native American trading post or something down in Wyoming, you know, they might not have my book. But if it was through a traditional publisher, they're going to do all that work, and they're going to get those out distributed to the different stores and such. So it's a personal preference on what you want. So that's a good question, though. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Illustrations. Who did the illustrations?
Oh, good point. Okay, so I am not an artist at all. I can draw stick people. I cannot draw for anything. So with that, when you are doing a traditional publisher and you have a picture book and stuff, they're going to decide who your illustrator is going to be, or they're going to work that out for you. I don't have a traditional publisher. I have the hybrid, and also did the self-publishing. And so with self-publishing, you're going to have to find someone who will illustrate them for you, and you have to give them the all the specifics and such on what size, what type of like pixels and all this stuff. So it's kind of like you do all the hard work for them and say, this is what I need this image, all the images in. My illustrator for all three of my books and my upcoming books as well too is I use the same illustrator, and she's actually my cousin. And so she does all my illustrations for me. And we have our own little deal that we work out where I give her a flat rate per image. And whatever she does, she just gives me all the rights to it. So that's the deal that we worked out. As far as if you don't know an illustrator, there's sites online that you can find an illustrator for, you know, depending on their talents. It depends on which price you're going to pay per image. So, or if you know an illustrator that's local, like for me, you know, work something out with that illustrator, because a lot of our local artists and stuff would love to see their work in children's books. That gives them an opportunity as well too. And with my cousin who did my illustrating, it kind of inspired her to write her own children's picture book. And so she's self-published on her own with Amazon as well too. And she has her first book out. So I hope that answers that question.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would have been neat if you would have had experience with, for example, like some kind of online contractor, like, I don't know, Fiverr or finding, because yeah, I've been really hesitant to do that, but also, yeah, doing things with people, you know, personally can also go a little weird. So yeah,
That's
good to hear
true.
that it worked out for you.
That is true. I do recommend if it's someone that you don't really know and 100% trust, like I know 100% can trust my cousin. She's just, you know, that type of person. She's a very trustful, very honest person. If you know of an artist who is local and you might not have like a long history with them, I would suggest writing up your own contract, or you can even find examples of contracts online that you can sign with each other. So, you know, and that's something that you can be worked out between both of you, is that, you know, whether that's 50% of the payments up front and 50% at the end, or, you know, after every image is done, you're getting payments, however that works out for you, that you have some type of contract that you're kind of legally protected by. So, but I am closing out here now with a minute or so to go. So I just want to, in closing, I want to say thank you for everybody coming on today. You know, I really hope that I can see all of you have more projects out, or your first project out, because we need more children's authors and such to be able to have some of that literature in our classrooms and in our homes and libraries. And so it was such an honor to share with the little knowledge that I know, because I still consider myself a newbie, is what the kids say, a newbie into this area and such of children's literature and stuff. But it was an honor to share with what I know. And I hope that at least something was helpful for you today, and that you get your project started or continue to keep going. So thank you so much for joining me today.